In about 30 seconds, we can start. Lovely. So, have a lovely day.
Okay, everyone. So, hello again, and it's really nice to hear people from so many places around the world. That's really, really cool, actually, because the Buddhist community is often so dispersed, and it's kind of nice if we can't have a community around us, physically around us, at least we can have one virtually around us. So it's really nice to see people coming on board in this way, and it kind of brings the Buddhist community. We can all support each other from far away, which is marvelous. But anyway, yesterday we were looking at the connection between two very famous kind of teaching frameworks, if you like, that the Buddha used. One is being dependent origination, and then from that dependent origination emerges this other sequence, which we might call dependent liberation. Yeah, it has been given different names in different places, but I think dependent liberation is a really nice one because it shows precisely that, how liberation itself depends on certain causes and conditions to be possible. That's kind of the purpose of this. And the whole retreat had the sort of the main title being why. So this then is the why of liberation, the causality, bringing it back all the way down to the kind of root cause of that, which is very similar to what we saw before, the idea of hearing the word of the Buddha and gaining faith in that, and then this thing coming out as a consequence. So dependent liberation, and yesterday we had a look at that dependent liberation from one particular angle, the angle of depending, rising, ending, and suffering, and then how that suffering then gives rise. It's like an impetus for practice, an impetus for faith, an impetus for searching, to be precise. You search for something, you know that something isn't quite right with life. Is there a solution to these problems in our life? And then through that search, you find some kind of solution. Ideally, you find a solution which takes you all the way to the end of suffering. It's what the Buddha promises. But sometimes, if there's no Buddhism around, you may have to settle for something less. Yeah, but the Buddhist teaching is the one that promises a complete end to the particular problem. So again, that faith, and then you kind of start fulfilling these various factors that lead to ultimate liberation from suffering itself. In other words, the highest happiness, to see it from the positive point of view. This particular sequence is actually talked about in a number of different ways in the suttas. It has a number of different factors depending on where you look at it, but the basic idea is actually the same. So what I want to do now is to look at an alternative way of presenting this particular sequence, the dependent liberation sequence, and see if we can gain some more insight into how it works by considering this alternative formulation of the sequence. So this is the next sutta. Today we are now in the numerical discourses of the Buddha, the Anguttara Nikaya, and this is chapter 10. So chapter 10 is on all the things that have 10 items. That's how the Anguttara Nikaya works. And this is the second sutta. It is here translated as making a wish, is the translation given by Bhante Sujato in his Sutta Central translation. So I will just read it out first of all, the whole sutta, and then we can discuss some of the important elements. Yeah, and you will see it is very, very similar to the previous one. The framing is a little bit different, and often a lot of the information in the sutta is actually in the framing itself. Yeah, so you may see this. Remember, this is oral literature, and because it's oral literature, they had to make it conducive for retaining the things in mind. So often the elements will be the same, and the framing will then be slightly different from one sutta to the next one. This is conducive to memorization because you have certain things that are stable, that are there all the time, and then some of the external things, if you like, vary from sutta to sutta. Anyway, let's see what this sutta has to say. So this is how it is translated in Bhante Sujata's translation. It's, straight away, mendicants, you know, straight away, it is Ajahn Sujata's translation. An ethical person who has fulfilled ethical conduct needs not make a wish. May I have no regrets. It is only natural that an ethical person has no regrets. When you have no regrets, you need not make a wish. May I feel joy. It is only natural that joy springs up when you have no regrets. When you feel joy, you need not make a wish. May I experience rapture. It is only natural that rapture arises when you are joyful. When your mind is full of rapture, you need not make a wish. May my body become tranquil. It is only natural that your body becomes tranquil when your mind is full of rapture. When your body is tranquil, you need not make a wish. May I feel bliss. It is only natural to feel bliss when your body is tranquil. When you feel bliss, you need not make a wish. May my mind be stilled. It is only natural for the mind to be stilled when you feel bliss. When your mind is stilled, you need not make a wish. May I truly know and see. It is only natural to truly know and see when your mind is stilled. When you truly know and see, you need not make a wish. May I become disillusioned and dispassionate, or may I have aversion perhaps and dispassion. It is only natural to become disillusioned and dispassionate when you truly know and see. When you're disillusioned and dispassionate, you need not make a wish. May I realize the knowledge and vision of freedom. It is only natural to realize the knowledge and vision of freedom when you have aversion and you are dispassionate. And so mendicants, good qualities flow on and fill up one to the other for going from the near shore to the far shore. So there you are. So you can see very, very similar to the previous sutta we looked at. But because on this retreat we want to focus a little bit on this idea of the dependent liberation, I find it useful to see it again. Yeah, it is often when you see these things many times, they become more meaningful. But you will notice there are a few things here that are different. And one of the very important differences here is this idea that you need not make a wish. And I will discuss that later on what that means. Basically, it means you cannot will these things into existence. Yeah, they happen according to nature. It is only natural that these things arise. This is an addition to the previous one, and it's a very interesting addition with many implications for how we do our meditation practice and all of these kind of things. Another important difference here is the starting point. Yeah, the starting point starts out with ethics. Instead of starting with faith, it begins with morality and conduct and character, if you like. And then the idea of not having regrets based on that good character. Yeah, so this is slightly different. And in fact, this idea of this thing starting with ethics, this is more common in the suttas than starting with faith. I think the other sutta we were looking at is the only one where the sequence actually starts with faith. This is the one, all the other ones start with ethics or morality. So this is a very important point as well, which we're also going to have to discuss a little bit to kind of understand the implications of that. But before I go into these little details, what I would like to do is to ask the question, well, we have now looked at the sutta from same sequence from two different points of view, and the question always arises, well, is that a reasonable thing to do? Yeah, how do we know that the sutta is really important? How do we know that the sutta is something that is really worthy of study? And how do we know suttas that might be less important and less interesting? What are the criteria for deciding this? And what the important criteria is that those suttas that you see again and again, frameworks that kind of recur in different contexts to different audiences, with slight variations on the theme, etc., these are going to be the important ones, right? Why? Well, because the Buddha emphasized them himself. So if the Buddha emphasized them in a number of different places, then there must be important teachings. Whereas those teachings that occur maybe once or twice in the suttas and only occur in verse. Yeah, remember you read verse. I think verse is really inspiring, very uplifting, and it has, of course, that's the purpose of verse. It has to be inspiring and uplifting. It uses the words in a way that is kind of slightly rhythmic, and there is a certain what is it called when the sound of the words are kind of have the same sound. And anyway, I can't remember what that's called now. What is it called again? Or anyway, it doesn't matter. And it has a certain rhythm to it because the number of syllables is just about the same, yeah. And the way it is phrased, it's phrased with using more metaphors and similes, often using words that are a bit more rare. So verse has a very important place in the Buddha's teachings, and the Buddha himself used, I think it's called alliteration. I think it's called alliteration when you have words that are begin with it, all the words begin with a K, for example. It's a kind of resonance because of that. It's kind of cool. But so it has an important function in Buddhism to inspire people and lift us up. But it is not very useful for precise teachings. Yeah, precisely because they have a constraint on how you can express yourself in verse. There's a limited number of syllables per line. It is meant to uplift rather than to be precise. So for that reason, verse is not the ideal place to look for a proper understanding of the Buddhist teachings. But what is interesting, we were just discussing this with Venerable Chanda just before we were starting this. It is interesting to see how large a part of the Buddhist world actually discusses the rare occurrences in the suttas and focus on those rare occurrences precisely because they are perhaps less well understood. And then they draw all kind of conclusions from the rare occurrences, and they understand the common passages, the passages that occur again and again. They understand those in light of the rare ones, which is exactly the reverse of what we should be doing. And this was a famous piece of advice that Ajahn Brahmali received when he went to Sri Lanka and he went to visit the very famous monk Venerable Nyanaponika, who ran the Buddhist Publication Society. He was German by birth and he moved to Sri Lanka, was a Buddhist monk for 40, 50 years or something. And he told Ajahn Brahmali that the way to interpret suttas is always to focus on those passages that occur again and again and again. And the rare passages should be understood in light of the common ones, and not the common ones understood in light of the rare ones. Yeah, so you have to get these things the right way around, and otherwise we might have a problem. So these are some of the kind of ideas that you need really to be able to interpret the suttas in the right way. It's very easy to get these things wrong unless you have some principles that you apply in understanding these teachings. So coming back to this teaching here, dependent liberation teaching, how important is that? And the answer is it is very important because it does occur lots and lots of times in the suttas. I should maybe make a count one of these days to see how many, but if I were to guess how many times it occurs, I would say between 20 and 30 times in the suttas, yeah, in various kind of guises, various kinds of slight phrase, slightly different, with a slightly different number of factors, etc. But it's not just that it occurs on its own many times, but it is also very closely related to some of the other important teachings. It is very closely related to the Anapanasati sequence. And I will show you later on how that is. It is also very closely related to the sequence of the what we call the Anusatis, the recollections, the recollection of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, which is also a core teaching of the Buddha, very closely related to that. And it is also very closely related to the 7 factors of awakening, the 7 Buddhas. Yeah? So there's lots of very important frameworks coming together, all pointing towards the same thing. It is also the case, as I mentioned very briefly the other day, is that if you take the suttas that exist in Chinese, in the Agamas, and you translate from the Chinese into English, and you translate from the Pali into English, and you compare, It is almost exactly the same, almost word for word the same. Yeah, this is after being apart for 2,200 years. Yes, having been looked after in different cultures, having been studied in very different languages, and then you translate them back into English and you compare them, and they are still the same. Astonishing. It's almost to the point of being hard to believe that actually happens to be the case. So we can be pretty sure this is what the Buddha taught, yeah? So all-encompassing. Yeah? Now, the fact that it is similar to the 7 bojjhangas, the 7 factors of awakening, is also very significant, because the 7 factors of awakening are part of the set of teachings called the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas, the 37 aids to awakening that you may have heard about. And these 37 aids to awakening, these were spoken about by the Buddha in a number of places, but in particular, they were spoken by the Buddha in the Mahaparanibbana Sutta. Yeah, Mahaparanibbana Sutta, the greater sutta on the Buddha's extinguishment, when the Buddha was about to pass away, and he was traveling from Rajagaha, the capital of Magadha, traveling towards Kushinara, where he was about to pass away. And he knew that his end was coming. So the teaching that he gives in the suttas are particularly powerful and important, because the Buddha is now laying down, if you like, the ground rules for how the Sangha is to survive after he passes away. Yeah? So the teachings are really especially interesting, because we are part of that generation who happen to be around after the Buddha has passed away. So this is very directly applicable. And one of the things the Buddha says in this Mahaparanibbana Sutta, he tells us what are the teachings of the Buddha, what are the real teachings, what is it that really matters. And what he says is that you should consider the 37 aids to awakening, the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas. This is what you should consider the teaching of the Buddha. Part of those 37 is the 7 factors of awakening. The 7 factors of awakening is very closely related to what we're seeing now. Yeah. So this really is a core part of the Buddha's teachings. It is almost the very essence of what he was teaching. Yeah. So this makes it quite exciting, right? We're really on the trail of the what the Buddha was, the essential aspects of his teachings. So what I would like to do, I would like you to show some comparison between these teachings, just to show you how they work in parallel. Yes, I'm going to share the screen with you like I did before. So hopefully I will be able to do this again. So I'm going to bring up the screen share, and where are we now? I think this one here. Oops, what was going on? Yeah, so okay, so I hope you can see that. So here you have the dependent liberation. Everyone can see this? Yeah, it's good. Yeah. So dependent liberation on the left side. This is what I was just reading out, and then you have the awakening factors there on the right side. Yeah, and from that you can see pretty much that these are very closely related to each other. In fact, it doesn't quite give the full sense of the overlap. To really understand the full sense, you have to understand some of the implications of the terms that we see here. So, for example, here, when you look at the dependent liberation, starting off with virtue and non-remorse, yeah, this is like the foundation of mindfulness. So this is very closely related to mindfulness. If you practice that virtue fully, so that you do, achieve a very deep state of non-remorse, well, mindfulness is really the outcome of that. It's very closely related to each other. Investigation, which is the second factor of the 7 factors of awakening, is like a furthering of that mindfulness practice. And then you have gladness and energy. Gladness, energy, and mindfulness. These 3 factors are always closely related in the suttas, because when you have a clear mind, you are present, you tend to have gladness associated with that. When you have gladness, the gladness of the Dhamma, you tend to be present because you're enjoying the present. And with that gladness and mindfulness, there's energy. When you are glad, when you are joyful, there's energy in the mind. These are very closely related to each other as well. So that it may look like it isn't all that close, but actually it is much closer than it may seem. Then you have joy and tranquility, which are both there. Then you have the happiness on the dependent liberation side, which is just like an additional factor. Then you have samadhi in both cases. You have the even-mindedness in the awakening factor. Even-mindedness is here just equanimity or upekkha. And upekkha is this idea of just looking on, looking on like in a very unbiased way to see what is actually there. So it is just a profound aspect of samadhi. Samadhi to its kind of deepest states, if you wish. And based on that, you then have all the insight experiences, and the insight experiences are only found in dependent liberation and not found among the awakening factors. And the reason for that is because the awakening factors are what leads to awakening, whereas dependent liberation includes the actual awakening experience itself. That is the distinction, the main distinction between the two. So anyway, so that is the connection between dependent liberation and the awakening factors. I got through this fairly quickly. Then we have the connection between dependent liberation and mindfulness of breathing here. Again, you can see quite a few similarities there. One of the things here again is that mindfulness of breathing is always practice based on virtue. So virtue is like the foundation for that practice anyway. And then you have the joy, which is in common, your tranquility is in common, the happiness and gladness in common, the samadhi is in common. And here, because we are talking about mindfulness of breathing, that is also includes all the insight as well, coming after the samadhi experience. So here, all the insight factors is the same between mindfulness and breathing and dependent liberation at the bottom there. I'm not doing this in detail, so don't worry so much if you don't get everything here. I just want to show the general idea of the parallel structure of these things. Then we have dependent liberation and the 6 recollections. And here you can see a very strong, maybe even stronger parallel between these two. So the gladness, the joy, tranquility, happiness, samadhi, everything is there. And then the 6 recollections, they stop with samadhi, and then the outcome is of course, the insights, which are also included in the dependent liberation sequence. So anyway, I just make my case. I don't know what when I say these things, it might, maybe you will accept it, but it's often more powerful to see it for yourself, how parallel these things actually are. So, okay, let's, I'll leave that at that. I'm going to come out of the sharing again and come back to the screen. Okay, so, okay. So there you are. So that's just established that what we are doing now is actually very important. It's really a teaching that matters a lot. So it's worthwhile studying. And as I mentioned yesterday, this is really the psychology of meditation that we are seeing here. What is the first-person perspective of meditation? How ideally we're supposed to experience this? This is really what this is about. So when we look at the sequence here, starting with ethics, then almost everything else is part of the meditation experience. Starting there with joy, not regret, and so basically what this table is, what this is, it is a way of talking about satipatthana, and then samadhi. So it's a detailed exposition of satipatthana and samadhi, the two coming together. This is what this really is about. So each factor here is a way of expressing the evolution of the Satipatthana practice. And so Satipatthana, seen from this perspective, is quite pleasant. Yeah, it looks really kind of like a joyful and positive experience, ending in this beautiful samadhi experiences. So this is how you can look at this. Yeah, apart from if you take out the first part there. So the first part, then, the ethics and non-regret, is the only part which is not about Satipatthana and samadhi. So that then is really about the first 6 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. Yeah, ethics, of course, right speech, right action, right livelihood, but also right effort. And remember that right effort, to a very large extent, the purification of the mind. That is how it is always described in the suttas, the sense restraint, the clear comprehension, and these kind of things. So this is a very important part of it. But sometimes sila also includes right view as well, which is kind of strange. Why does sila include right view? And that is in part because sila in the Buddhism really means more than what we call ethics or morality in English. Sila is almost like character or habit. Yeah, it has to do with almost our entire way of being. If you say someone's character research, well, you're talking about almost a sum total of the qualities of a person. Yeah, that character. And of course, that also includes views. Yeah, views are part of that. So you can argue here that sila sort of includes the views. And because views are absolutely fundamental for this sequence to work, when we talk about samadhi, it is samadhi when the view is right. Yeah. So view here has to be understood in one way or another. And I would argue, arguably, it is included here in sila. So the whole 6 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, the first 6 ones are right there in sila, and then the rest of the sequence comes from that, specifically Satipatthana and samadhi, and then the result at the very end. Yeah, so that's how you can think about this particular sequence. Now, as I mentioned, one of the very interesting points about this sequence is this idea that it says here, you do not need to make a wish. Yeah, which I think is a little bit weak translation of the Pali. The Pali quite literally says this cannot be done by an act of will. Mahaparanibbana literally means cannot be not to be done by an act of will. That's what the Pali says. That is quite much a lot stronger, right, than you need not make a wish. You need not make a wish. To me, it's a little bit wishy-washy, if you pardon the pun, that you don't need to make a wish. But it cannot be done by an act of will. Actually, it's very powerful. It shows something very important about how meditation works. Not only does it say that, but it also says that this is in accordance with nature. I would rather translate it is just natural, but really it means that this is in accordance with nature. In other words, it is natural. It happens according to certain structures of how the mind functions. Yeah, when you put in some things, then certain things result. And those causal structures, that is what matters here. These things are natural phenomena occurring in a certain sequence, according to certain laws, the laws of the mind, if you like. And the implications of this are very powerful, yeah, because if something is natural, if A or if B happens because of A, if that is the nature of things, if you try to make something which is natural happen with your will, you're going to destroy it because it's no longer natural at that point. Yeah, it is no longer occurring just according to its own laws, but you're trying to make it happen through your own will. And very often, if you do that, you end up destroying that natural process. So our job in the meditation is to avoid applying the will, and not to apply the will, rather than to apply it. It is maybe not the case that the will should not be applied at all. I mentioned before that sometimes you can nudge the mind a little bit, yeah. You can, especially at the beginning, when you want to kind of get this started, and you want to reflect a little bit on something positive, something uplifting, and you get the thing started. But the more you proceed on this path, the more you want to get out of the way and allow nature to take its course. It's supposed to be natural, yeah. It is like that nice simile that sometimes Ajahn Brahmali uses. Yeah, if you have a little flower and you kind of watch the flower and it starts to sprout and there's a little bit of green sprouting out of the ground. And after a while, you get really impatient. So you're going to help the flower a little bit. So you're pulling on this little thing coming out of the ground. Yeah. And of course, if you do that, you're going to destroy the plant. Yeah. Because flowers happen according to nature, not according to your will. You can't will flower to grow faster by pulling it. And if you pull the flower to grow faster, well, you're going to destroy the whole thing. And meditation is like that. It's like a flower. It's like a 1,000-petal lotus that has to open up gradually, stage by stage, according to its own laws, according to its own speed and time sequence. And then you're going to get it right. Then it's going to work for you now. And it is surprising how difficult this can be to do, yeah, because we are such compulsive doers very often. We identify so much with the doing in our lives, and because we are the doers, it can be very difficult to let it be. And one of the monks I know was actually a very good meditator. He gets really good meditation. He, gets some very divine, he does all things and all of this kind of things. And he told me that after meditating for many, many years, and he's also a staunch Ajahn Brahmali disciple. You wouldn't know who it is because anyway, it doesn't matter. And so he'd been following Ajahn Brahm's ideas. Ajahn Brahm is always about let things be, don't get involved, sit back, enjoy. That's kind of Ajahn Brahm's meditation technique. And he said he'd been following this, and still, he said, it was so hard to let go of the final little thing of doing, of being involved, of attaching, of holding on. Yeah, so difficult. And he realized that the fault that he had been doing all along, every stage he advanced, was always about letting go of that doing, letting go of the holding on to what was happening. And this was a really super duper meditator, and it shows how hard this can be to let go of that. But it's not impossible as long as you keep it in mind. And this is one of the reasons why, some of the teachings that I was trying to give before, some of the perceptions that we give to, if you give rise to the right kind of perception in your meditation, you can kind of get into that state of mind where you do anything. And that is what I was saying about the idea of, we were talking the other day, someone asked the question about going to sleep. Yeah, is going to sleep a bit like going to meditation? And that was that was a very good question. And the answer is yes. Yeah, precisely, because when you go to sleep, you don't make an effort to go to sleep. Yeah, it's almost the exact opposite. You let go of effort. That's when you go to sleep. So it is a nice parallel, yeah, a nice simile for how meditation works. So it works for you, and you can kind of get into this idea of what happens when you go to sleep at night, yet just before you fall asleep, what is it that you do at that point? That is similar to what happens in meditation practice. You're letting go of things, letting go of the things, allowing things to become peaceful. The other one that I like to use is the of, what you do when you are very tired about something. Yeah, you have been working hard all day with whatever, and you feel really exhausted, and you just sit down somewhere, or you lie down somewhere, and you just allow your mind to run. Yeah, what do you do at that point? You don't do anything because you're exhausted. You just allow things to be. Yeah, sitting down in your favorite armchair or lying down on your bed or whatever it is that you do. Yeah, and you allow things to be. You don't control anything at that point precisely because you are tired. And all the controlling was what led to the tiredness in the first place. That is another way of thinking about it, yeah, except that you're not tired, but the mind state is the same. The way you guide the mind is similar to that. And the last one to avoid this problem of doing too much is the death contemplation, yeah? When you are on your deathbed, how much doing are you going to do? Are you going to strive really hard to achieve something? Or are you just going to say, okay, now is the time to relax. Now the time is to chill, to allow me to take the course. I'm going to trust I made enough good karma. I'm going to trust the journey. I'm going to think of this as a yay, I'm going to die. It's going to be so nice. And now I'm really sick of this body. I could do with a new body. So let me get rid of this and let me enjoy the journey instead. Yeah. If you think like that, you just sit back, you enjoy the journey, then you are on the right track. And this is one of the reasons why I'm a little bit concerned with the kind of standard Theravada idea that it is so important to be in the right mind state when you die. The last mind moment is so important because that decides your birth. But that is a recipe for disaster because it makes you kind of slightly anxious when you die. Oh, I must not get angry now. If I get angry now, I might go to a really bad destination. And because you must not get angry, well, probably you will get angry, yeah? Because what you think about is what happens usually. Don't think about an elephant and straight away you think about an elephant, you know? So, don't get angry. No, I'm feeling this angry. No, stop. And you kind of get desperate. Forget about all that. It's not even true. This is, again, part of the commentarial tradition in Buddhism. The Buddha in this life, and the last mind moment is not so important. The reason why it is said to be so important is because of later development in the Buddhist Abhidhamma, where they talk about the Chutti-citta and the Patisandhi Vijnana, which in brief are the Chutti-citta is a mind that passes away when you die, and the Sangha is a rebirth linking consciousness, which then comes immediately after the Chutti-citta. One comes after the other one. There's nothing in between them. Yeah? And because of that, then the last one actually becomes quite important. But there's no evidence for that in the sutta. In fact, all the evidence points to something completely different. It points to the idea of an intermediate stage when kind of your karma sort of ripens and comes together, and then you pass on. So forget about all of that. On your deathbed, enjoy the relaxation, enjoy the enjoy the journey, knowing that you have done what you can to live well, to do the right thing. And now is the time just to relax and to see what happens. Yeah, this exciting journey that happens afterwards. And so when you get into that kind of attitude, yeah, what do you do? And it's like when you see someone passing away, someone who has done the right work, and someone who is able to do this in the right way, they really let go. Yeah, they really relax. It's very peaceful. It can be very peaceful to be around someone who knows how to die well. Yeah, they really understand how they are letting go. And in their presence, you can gain some of those qualities right there. That is my way. There's nothing to be done there. Bring that idea into your mind now if you can, and then use that to counteract the tendency to do things. Yeah? So some of these ideas will be, I think, very useful. So, and of course, one of the other things that is fascinating about this, because I have, I've been Ajahn Brahmali disciple for a long time, I don't know, since before I came to Perth, so 28 years or something like that. And when you have been a disciple of someone for a long time, it's like you listen, of course, to what he has to say, but you also, you don't take things on board blindly, and you reflect on them. So I always find it very useful when I see confirmation of how Ajahn Brahm teaches, confirmation in the suttas. And this is one classic example of such confirmation. Yeah, Ajahn Brahm says, let go, don't use any willpower, allow things to be. Yeah, and then the results will come. Well, here we have the Buddha saying exactly the same thing, which is very useful. So what this means then is that as we let go, as you try not to control things, then this process happens on its own. Yeah, and you may then wonder, like I was talking about before, well, what if the process doesn't really happen this way? What if I get to a certain point and it kind of stops? It's like this, you come to this plateau, it doesn't go any further. Or maybe it doesn't even get started properly. Oh, I can't really feel all that much joy. Yeah? Well, what happens then? And what happens then is that you have to go, because this is a causal sequence. Sequence starts. And if the sequence doesn't begin for you, it means that maybe maybe there's something to be done at the very start of this thing, yeah, coming back to the idea of sila or virtue. Or if the sequence goes to a certain point, but then stops, it plateaus, again, you need to deepen the sila, deepen your habits, yeah, deepen, change your character a little bit, and then you are very likely to allow that the whole evolution of meditation to happen further, go further into the sequence as a consequence. So that is really that, yeah. And then there's two things that you have to do, because as I mentioned before, the sila has two aspects there. One is the right view, and the other one is then the your character in terms of your ethical conduct, right? These are the two things. So in terms of ethical conduct, yeah, you have to just, again, as I mentioned before, everything in Buddhism really is about ethics. When the ethics are established, meditation becomes automatic. What we're saying here, established ethics, then meditation is automatic. Yeah? So it really comes back to ethics, morality, again and again and again. Morality here, of course, including not just the negative morality, don't do anything bad, but do be kind, caring, to say the right thing to people. Know that every time you open your mouth, there's a possibility of giving someone a gift of beautiful speech. Yeah, and also the mental aspect of these things. Develop more metta, develop more kindness inside of you. Be more forgiving of the world around you, people around you. Don't be quick to judge people. Understand that we're all in this problem together. Yeah, and as you do that, then in mind, I will talk more about the ethics of the mind later on, and not maybe tomorrow or the day after, whatever it is, because this is a very important part of changing our outlook, how we deal with people in the world, is such a fundamental aspect of the whole idea of ethics. Yeah, so go back to ethics. Be honest with yourself. What are the problems I have? What are the people you find difficult to deal with? What are some of your character flaws, perhaps? Yeah, how can you change that? Look for the solution. Yeah, really, as you keep on investigating, as you keep on looking, you will find that solution. You just have to be very persevering, very committed to this. And as you are committed, I guarantee you, you will find the solution. And sometimes, as I mentioned before, it will be painful. We don't want always to see that we have character flaws, yeah, because it goes against the ego. Doesn't want to see that. We want to think of ourselves as good, and you are good. Yeah, you don't have to worry about that. Every one of you on this retreat is a good person. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. What's the point of being on a retreat if you are a bad person? So you are already good. You're already inclining in the right way. Your heart is in the right place. You may not be perfect, but that's fine. We don't expect perfection, but your intention is good. Yeah, if you didn't have a good intention, there's no way you would be doing things like this. So you are already good. So because you are good, you can have a sense of security about yourself. You can already feel good about yourself to some extent. So stand on that positive perception of yourself. And when you that is your foundation. It becomes easier to accept that also you may have a few flaws, yeah? And then you accept the flaws, then you can deal with them, then you can move on the path as a consequence. So appreciate yourself, yeah? Remember that the good qualities are there. The world around you is not always going to tell you about your good qualities. So sometimes you just have to trust your own judgment that you have them there. And that's okay, yeah? You know, I mean, there's no doubt that is the case, because again, you wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case. So build up your moral fabric. Then the idea of right view, yeah, and it's such an important part of this Buddhist teachings, and it's all about where for happiness, where to avoid. What are things in the world that would give real satisfaction? Yeah, the idea is the right view about morality, the right view about the world outside being problematic and impermanent, unreliable, and uncertain, not necessarily always dukkha, but reliable. The world inside being much more reliable and conducive to far more happiness, and ultimately the idea that all of these 5 khandhas are really out of control. And we'll come back to that later on when we look at the Anapanasati Sutta. So getting, again, the values in the right place. This is what the right view is about. And if the values are in the right place, then when you meditate, your mind will leap to the breath. You will think, I'm not interested in that world anymore, side. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to waste my endless problems. And so because your values are shaped by that right view, you will naturally want to go within, to let go of the external world. As a consequence, meditation becomes far easier, far more satisfactory because of that. So this is one of the little tricks to use in meditation practice. One of the reflections that I really recommend you to do. Remind yourself at the beginning that the world is, it is there, and there's some joys, there's down to the world, but ultimately it is out of control. Ultimately, it's going to let you down. Okay, let me leave that whole world aside. Let me go somewhere else. Yeah, now is the time to go in rather than going without. And then you find it easier to stay with the breath, to stay with the internal things as a consequence. So right view and sila, right view and morality, the 2 basic foundations for all of meditation practice. They give you the values and they give you the support through feeling good about yourself that virtue gives you. And then, of course, because of that, you have then non-remorse. That's the next factor on this particular path. Yeah, non-remorse means that you, first of all, you don't feel bad about yourself, but non-remorse is also this is a very kind of subtle thing, because remorse sometimes manifests slightly just lessening of the energy of the mind, a slight darkening inside, yeah, a lessening of the joy, a lessening of the natural buoyancy that you might have if you really feel good about yourself. So non-regret needs to be understood in a very broad context here. And then you will be able to see, if you look at yourself, that sometimes it's brighter, other times it is less bright, and that will be connected with the virtue, yeah, at that particular time. How are you thinking right now? And if you have a lot of metta for the world, high virtue, your mind will be far brighter, yeah, less remorse. If you have a lot of ill will, it will be the exact opposite. So notice the connection there between the morality and how the nature of the mind, yeah, or the quality of the mind that comes from that. That is the idea of non-regret. And then this whole sequence, yeah, I'm not going to go through it again because we have seen it already. This whole sequence that comes out of that, builds out of these qualities. And then at the very end of this sutta, yeah, the Buddha says, and so mendicants, good qualities, go on and fill up from one to the other, going from the near shore to the far shore. Yeah, the idea is that fill up is, you're starting with the virtue, filling that up, and as that quality fills up, you're filling up the non-remorse, and as you keep on, remember the rain on the mountaintop, it keeps on raining on the mountaintop, keep on doing the right thing in place, and as the rain accumulates, and gradually, every day, every week, the meditation goes a little bit deeper, and you come closer and closer to this goal. And eventually, if you keep on doing it long enough, the Buddha promises you one outcome, and that promise is liberation of the mind, freedom from all suffering, the highest happiness that is experienced by a human being, or indeed anyone else in the entire world. So, there you are. That is that beautiful little sutta, which I've always found so inspiring. Let's leave it at that for now, and let's do some more meditation together here. Okay, so sit comfortably as usual and find a nice posture for yourself. And as always, make sure that you give yourself plenty of time at the beginning. Remember the idea that patience is the fastest way in this practice. If we're not going to do anything, if we're not going to get involved in the practice, if we're not going to use the will, well, then patience is really the only way. The moment you get impatient, at that point you start doing, you start trying to control that. So patience is really the critical thing here. Sitting back and just enjoying what you have already, enjoying every little smidgen of peace that you might get through the meditation practice, and then gradually, slowly heading in the right direction. And to help you with guiding the mind in the right way, try, if you wish, just to imagine yourself in an armchair, sitting back after a long day's work. And what do? You just let go. You allow the world to be. You allow the mind to flow. You allow everything to be without any kind of interference, any kind of control. You're just relaxing, observing things without judgment, and try to get into a mood similar to that, a mode similar to that, and then allow things to calm down all by themselves. And as you are just enjoying the peace and allowing the thoughts to arise, there comes a point when it becomes entirely natural to start watching the breath. It's almost as if eyes rising here brings the breath into the awareness of the mind. Then you are almost automatically doing mindfulness of breathing here. And if you come to this point, make sure that you have a very positive relationship with your breath, seeing your breath as an old friend, a friend who supports you, a friend who is always there to keep you alive and keep you going. This wonderful friend, the breath, not only does this friend keep us alive, but it also helps us to move towards bliss and peace and stillness. What kind of friend can you have who is better than that? The best friend in the world, this beautiful breath, and move on with a positive perception as you take the meditation. Okay, so once again, coming close to the end, and please take a few moments just to reflect back on the meditation and ask yourself about the quality. How does meditation work? Try to understand what leads to success and what leads to the meditation not working out so well. Okay, everyone, that's it for now. See you back again in a couple of hours.